Imagine a city so dark you could not see your own feet. This was London in December 1952. A thick, yellow fog known as the Great Smog covered the entire city. It was not an ordinary fog from the river, this was a man-made cloud, a mixture of smoke and weather that created a truly extraordinary event. For 5 long days, from the 5th to the 9th of December, London was swallowed by this terrible smog. It crept into every corner, every home and every lung. This event would change the city forever, serving as a stark reminder of the delicate balance between human activity and the natural world we all depend upon for our very survival. The cause of this great smog was a perfect storm of conditions. London in the 1950s was a city powered by coal. People burned low-quality, smoky coal in their fireplaces to stay warm during a particularly cold winter. Factories and power stations across the city also burned massive amounts of coal, releasing thick plumes of black smoke into the air. This smoke was full of sulfur dioxide, a harmful gas. Usually this pollution would rise and scatter. But in December 1952, a strange weather pattern occurred. A layer of cold, still air was trapped beneath a layer of warmer air above, a phenomenon we call a temperature inversion. This weather condition acted like a giant lid placed over the city. The smoke and pollutants from millions of chimneys had nowhere to go. They were trapped at a ground level, mixing with the natural water vapor in the air. The fog became thicker and thicker each day as more pollution was pumped into the sky. The color of the fog changed from white to a sickly yellow-brown, and it carried a sharp metallic smell of sulfur. It was a choking, blinding blanket that settled over London, turning day into an eerie twilight and night into absolute blackness. This was no longer just fog. It had become a dense, toxic soup. The Great Smog of 1952 was a dramatic and frightening spectacle of nature and industry colliding. It was a visual representation of the air people were breathing. The city, famous for its pea super fogs, had never experienced anything on this scale. The air itself had become poisonous. This event was not just a historical curiosity, it was a powerful lesson. It showed with devastating clarity how our actions can pollute the very air we need to live. It was a wake-up call, demonstrating that the environment has its limits and that ignoring them can lead to dreadful and tragic consequences for us all. During those 5 days, life in London almost stopped. The smog was so dense that visibility dropped to just a few feet, and in some places people could not even see the other side of the street. Getting around the city became a nightmare. Buses and cars crawled along at a snail's pace, with conductors walking in front of the vehicles, holding lanterns to guide the drivers. Eventually, most public transport had to be abandoned altogether. Trains ran late or were cancelled, and even the boats on the River Thames stopped moving. The city, usually bustling with activity, fell into a strange and silent gridlock, trapped by the unbreathable air. Daily routines were completely disrupted. People tried to carry on with their lives, but it was incredibly difficult. Going outside was a challenge. You had to feel your way along walls and railings to avoid getting lost just a few streets from your own home. Children were told not to go out and play, and many schools closed their doors because it was too dangerous for pupils and teachers to travel. Inside homes, the smog found its way through every crack in the windows and doors. A fine layer of black, greasy soot settled on furniture, and the air indoors was often just as hazy and irritating as it was outside. Even entertainment and social life came to a halt. Theatres and cinemas had to close because the smog seeped into the auditoriums, making it impossible for the audience to see the stage or the screen. Concerts were cancelled because the halls were too foggy. Sporting events, a beloved part of London life, were all called off. The city's famous landmarks like Big Ben and Tower Bridge vanished completely behind the yellow curtain of smog. London, a vibrant and energetic capital, was reduced to a ghost town, where people were isolated in their homes, waiting for the air to clear. For the people of London, it was a deeply unsettling experience. The constant darkness and the feeling of being trapped were frightening. The air was not just hard to see through, it was hard to breathe. It stung the eyes and caused relentless coughing. Many people tied scarves or handkerchiefs over their mouths and noses in a desperate attempt to filter the air, but it did little to help. The experience of living through the Great Smog was something that Londoners would never forget. It was a time when their own city felt alien and hostile, a place where the simple act of breathing was a struggle. The most terrible part of the Great Smog was its effect on people's health. The air was filled with pollutants, particularly tiny particles of soot and high concentrations of sulfur dioxide. When people breathed this toxic mixture in, it attacked their lungs. The smog was especially dangerous for the very young, the elderly, and those who already had breathing problems like asthma or bronchitis. For them, every breath was a battle. Hospitals quickly became overwhelmed with patients suffering from severe respiratory distress. The smog was not just an inconvenience, it was a silent killer, claiming lives across the city. In the weeks that followed the smog, the true scale of the disaster became clear. Official figures initially estimated that around 4,000 people had died as a direct result of the fog. These were called excess deaths, meaning thousands more people died than would have been expected during that period. However, modern research suggests the number was much higher. It is now believed that the Great Smog was responsible for the premature deaths of up to 12,000 people, with many more suffering from its effects for months and even years afterwards. It was the deadliest air pollution event in the history of the United Kingdom. The health problems were widespread and severe. The pollutants in the smog inflamed the lining of the lungs, making it very difficult to breathe. This led to fatal cases of pneumonia and bronchitis. The smog also put a huge strain on people's hearts. Even healthy individuals reported feeling unwell, with symptoms like stinging eyes, sore throats, and persistent coughs. Undertakers ran out of coffins, and florists ran out of flowers as the city struggled to cope with the sheer number of funerals. It was a public health catastrophe on an unimaginable scale, all caused by the air itself. The tragedy was not just in the number of deaths, but in how quietly it all happened. There was no single dramatic accident. People simply became ill in their own homes, struggling for breath. The smog was a slow and invisible poison. It took time for the government and the public to fully grasp the connection between the thick fog and the soaring death rate. This delayed understanding meant that for days, people were unknowingly breathing in air that was causing irreparable harm. The Great Smog was a brutal lesson in how pollution can directly and fatally impact a human population. When the wind finally picked up on the 9th of December and blew the smog away, Londoners breathed a collective sigh of relief. The sky cleared and the sun reappeared. But the memory of the dark, choking days remained. The shocking number of deaths could not be ignored. The Great Smog of 1952 became a turning point in how people thought about air pollution. It was no longer seen as just an unpleasant part of city life. It was now understood as a serious public health crisis that required urgent action from the government. The event sparked a national conversation about the need for cleaner air. In response to the public outcry and the overwhelming evidence of the smog's deadly impact, the government began to act. A committee was formed to investigate the disaster. Their findings led to a landmark piece of legislation, the Clean Air Act of 1956. This was a revolutionary law for its time. It introduced smoke control areas in towns and cities where only smokeless fuels could be burned. It also forced factories to switch to cleaner energy sources and build taller chimneys to help disperse pollutants higher up in the atmosphere, away from where people breathed. The Clean Air Act and subsequent environmental laws had a profound and lasting effect. Over the following decades, the air quality in London and other British cities improved dramatically. The thick pea super fogs that had once been a common feature of London winters became a thing of the past. The skies became clearer, and buildings that had been blackened by decades of soot were cleaned, revealing their original stone. The changes were a testament to the power of government regulation and public demand for a healthier environment. London had learned its lesson the hard way. The Great London Smog of 1952 remains a vital story for us today. It serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences of unchecked pollution. It teaches us that the health of our planet and the health of its people are deeply connected. The event showed that with political will and public support, it is possible to make significant changes to protect our environment. As we face new environmental challenges around the world, the memory of those 5 dark days in London reminds us of the critical importance of clean air and our shared responsibility to preserve it for future generations.